There we go.
All right, hello everybody. I think this is like our third or fourth official episode of Unbiased America Live. If you count the broadcast from Freedom Fest, I think it's the fourth. We're here with our regular panel, our most consistent panel. Well, consistent when Matt Palumbo's computer works. But I'm here with Matt Palumbo, being classically liberal, Unbiased America, just about everything else. And your book is now available for free for Liberty.me members, right, Matty?
Yep. I know. My first Conscious of a Conservative, I believe you have to be a member of Liberty.me, but I think in defense of classical liberalism, anyone can download it from Liberty.me, I believe. So
right.
That was available as well.
And Grant, the Modern Libertarian, and We Are Capitalists. There was one thing I wanted to. You came out with a piece. I don't know if it was this week or last week, but it was. We talked about it briefly last week.
Yes.
And then we'll get into that today too. So remind me about. I want to get into that.
All right.
The public employee unions.
I'm sure we will when we talk about how stupid liberals are at some point.
Yeah. And Kevin, who just showed up a little bit late, purveyor of Unbiased America. He started it. Also, it's the show with the same name, Unbiased America. I thought that was a good name. I think that's the only thing Kevin's ever done right. But today's show is mainly on a bunch of random different things. There's so much going on in the news. I kind of wanted to start out with Freedom Fest and what's upcoming in the show. Freedom Fest is really cool. Marco Rubio actually had a good speech. It was really it was a very speech predicated on capitalism. But the problem with that irked me was, and maybe you guys would get this, is I don't hear him saying that doing that speech anywhere else. Like, I don't hear him advocating for full-on free markets and using the term capitalism anywhere else. And I understand that, he's at Freedom Fest. He understands there's a ton of libertarians there, and he's not going to catch any flack. But to me, it shows how sometimes the establishment Republicans can be somewhat gutless in their defense of markets and in their defense of liberty, and they only do it when it's easy. And I think, you would think that it just turned me off to him. You would think that it would be like, oh man, this is really great. Turn me off to him, meaning why aren't you doing this other places? Grant, do you think I have a point?
Yeah, I think you do, and I don't really think it's something that's just to the conservatives side of the field. I think it's also to the left. I mean, you have basically most Democrat policies, you might as well call them socialism, and that's what they are.
Right.
But not many of them, actually really only Bernie Sanders, even though he's an independent, I guess, will use the word socialism.
Right.
Right. And they won't use it in public. Now, if they go to like some leftist convention, I'm sure that they don't mind tossing that out there, because it's probably seen as like an extremist word either way.
Mm-hmm.
Using those socialism versus free market capitalism, they're each way their own extreme in some ways.
Right, to that extent, and it should be explained that the definition of socialism has changed. If you really want to look at it, the definition of socialism as it's used today really means fascism. That's essentially what it is. It's not so much what it used to be, government control the means of production. Now today it's government controlling the means of production through regulations and taxation. And that's exactly what the Nazis in fascist Germany did, and Mussolini did in Italy. So I mean, it's really, I think it was Peter Drucker who said, fascism is a stage reached when socialism or communism becomes the illusion that it is. You know what I mean? It's like, let's keep the private property and the incentive structure in the hands of private property owners, but let's control that property through laws and regulations and progressive taxation. You know what I mean? So it's like when he's really saying socialism, he really means fascism to a certain degree. Kevin, you did a post on this one time. Would you agree with my assessment on that?
Say it again.
Did you hear anything I said?
Yeah, I did, but I just joined like a minute ago.
Okay, you were there when I started.
No, I wasn't.
Okay. I was talking about the definitions of socialism and how today, the way it's used today is more in tune with the definition of fascism, whereas socialism was once defined as the government controls the means of production. Today is government really controls the means of production not by ownership, but by heavy regulations, laws, and tax structure. Certainly the progressive tax structure, licensure, barriers to entry, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. That's the thing. A lot of people who call themselves socialists don't really understand is that socialism, true socialism, hasn't really existed in a long time. And you know how a lot of people call themselves capitalists say, oh well, you know, there's no such thing as a capitalist country and no such thing as a communist country. Socialism, true socialism, hasn't really existed since the 1920s in the Soviet Union. And what we have in America right now is not socialism, it's a mixed market. What they have in Cuba even is the closest thing you have to socialism, but it's still a mixed market.
Right.
And a lot of people are confused when you talk about socialism and they think, okay, well, the Scandinavian countries are socialist. No, they're not. In fact, the Scandinavian countries are more free than America is in a lot of ways. And so you have to be really careful when you get into defining what socialism is.
Let me stop you there, Kevin. Is it Sweden that has? Is it Sweden or the Swiss that don't have a minimum wage? I get them confused all the time.
I think it's Switzerland.
It's the Swiss, right?
Yeah, but they do have, and this is what a lot of people will tell you, is they do have a lot of their sectors go by minimum wages per industry.
Okay.
Per unions have, a lot of their unions have agreed to industry minimum wages, but that's different. And anytime somebody points that out to you, you have to say that's not really a minimum wage. That's a lot of different industries coming up with a different minimum wage per industry, and essentially that's a market wage.
Right, and they're involved. They're involved in this contract. They understand the costs associated, and they could set an appropriate price rather than some disinterested third party that has no ideas of the costs involved or what the labor in the labor market's worth.
Exactly,
right?
and when you have a minimum wage in America is based on there really is no restriction on what it's all about. I mean, it's any industry, any skill level, any country. I mean, any city, any state, and so forth. It's a true minimum wage, which has no real economic bearing on what it's on the people that are making it. In the Scandinavian countries, it's actually negotiated by the various industries, and it's actually different by different states, different places, and so forth. So it's a true market minimum wage. So you can't get into they're socialist, they're not, you know, we're socialist, we're not type of argument, because it's just not true.
Right. Maddie, you did a lot of work on this. I think you compared certainly I know you did health markets,
right.
If I'm not mistaken, and how the price system here in the United States best allocates resources in the healthcare industry as opposed to Britain and Canada. Mm-hmm. Insofar as the definition of socialism is concerned, a lot of people use that word, and Milton Friedman's brought it up a couple of times at the changing definition. And I brought this up implicitly with Peter Schiff. Mm-hmm. I used fascism instead of socialism, and he acknowledged it. He said, you know, we do have a fascist system. Do you think that's a correct assessment to apply the word fascist instead of socialism, or do you think there's political implications associated with the term fascism that you may not have under socialism, which I don't necessarily see?
I don't know. I think some people might invoke Godwin's law because fascism is obviously associated with Nazi Germany or some not so nice regimes. So some people might associate it with that and think it's an unfair comparison. But I mean, literally, fascism. The difference between that and socialism is fascism is you have private industry and you have government. Essentially have the ability to use it as a scapegoat since they're really behind the curtains instead of directly controlling things. So literally, yes, that's true. Also, to address what you brought up about healthcare and prices, it's really the only place in healthcare with the price system is in cosmetics and LASIK. There's two areas where health insurance doesn't apply. So there's people actually bear the cost of transactions. Can
you recollect? Let me stop you there. Can you recollect off the top of your head how prices have declined in the cosmetic and LASIK markets?
It has been significant. Unfortunately, I can't remember the exact figures. I have an article on it I could bring up and look at it in the meantime if you want them later in the show.
Okay, yeah. I think I remember reading it in A Conscience of the Young Conservative. I'm pretty sure that's where you had it.
One of the best books I've read.
Best books of all time.
Ever written, I believe.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Iliad and stuff. Get rid of that. If you have that,
there's Shakespeare, and then there's The Conscience of the Young Conservative.
Yeah, there is. There's Charles Dickens, and then there's Matt Palumbo. And I mean, but your work is really good. That can't be denied. There's a ton of effort put into that, and you're giving it away for free on Liberty Me, which is quite a very nice thing to do. I mean, people can really bolster their armory, their Liberty armory with your book. I'm a little confused. Kevin's leaving.
I see two Kevins.
I mean, one Kevin is enough, to be honest. I got to look at one of his mugs. Oh, there he is. Okay, so that's interesting stuff. I kind of want to shift gears here. Everybody's talking about the video, the Planned Parenthood video. The gal, while she's eating, talking about crushing a baby from the waist down and crushing it from the neck up while preserving the organs. Sick video. I mean, here she is. She's literally eating, and at one point she's chewing when she's trying to finish, talking about selling baby parts, and she swallows, and it's so the forceps know where to go. And I mean, how do you discuss this? They're so immune. They see this all the time. A baby's fetus being crushed. They literally crush its skull. A baby, and I think they sever the spine first because they're humane. You see, and then they crush the skull. And then if you're pro-life, you're horrible. You're uncivilized. I think it was on your page. Somebody said I was uncivilized because I'm a pro-life.
Yeah, the one girl said that if you don't support abortion, the next step is objectification and oppression. And I wanted to do something, but I didn't see it until later.
Right.
But I just thought to myself, like, all right, then what do you call Miley Cyrus dancing on stage like half naked?
No, that's okay.
Like, that's fine. That's fine. But killing somebody is permitting that is objectification. And
I think I brought up.
By the way. Most people killed by abortion are women. Is abortion part of the patriarchy, maybe, or?
Right. It's their womb. It's just not the baby doesn't. I guess the baby's womb doesn't count.
A huge percentage of them are minorities.
I know.
Like a lot.
Now let me ask you this. You brought this up. Margaret Sanger. People see her as some sort of hero, who was actually some sick, racist eugenicist in the early 20th century. Grant, can you give us some background? They wanted to put her on the $10 bill. These people.
That's sick. I found a letter that she wrote, and I put it on this post, and it was she wrote a letter to Dr. C.J. Gabriel, I think was his name, and she's talking about like hiring doctors. They got to be black, so everything seems like they're normal, and everyone seems like they're trusted. And then she goes, "They must never know of our plot to exterminate the Negro."
Yep.
And then it was like I forgot what you called it. It was like the Negro Plan or like the Negro Initiative or something like that. And it was just literally just a cleansing with the intent of reducing the population, or at least reducing the growth of the population.
I mean, that is just horrible.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. And there's more too, but
that's
just one that I found that really jumped off the page.
And that was a big part of the progressive movement at the time. I mean, you had Woodrow Wilson, the progressive movement. He resegregated the federal bureaucracy. It had been desegregated since the Civil War, and this guy comes in and resegregates it in the late in the early 20th century. I don't understand how these things are forgotten. I mean, the KKK movie Birth of a Nation had a screening. The fellow that made the movie was friends with Woodrow Wilson.
Well, you want to know this fact? Truman was a former KKK member when he ran for president. He got 70% of the black vote.
I mean, I don't know. Look, do you know where you got that information from, Matt?
I saw it on Reddit.com/Today I Learned, but I can get like a legit link.
Yeah, get that because in all honesty, I never when I studied Truman, I didn't see that he was a member of the KKK.
I think he was very young. He might have been a teenager at the time. I'll find a way to know that.
Yeah, because I know he worked on his dad's farm till he was 30, and And I mean, from what I learned, his family wasn't as racist as other Democrats at the time, but I could be completely wrong. You know what I mean?
Not as racist.
Not as racist. I mean, it was pretty bad. If you look at the policies enacted, by the Federal Housing Administration under FDR, there were explicit policies discriminating.
The minimum
The
wage.
minimum wage is
Very
its purpose.
obviously a attempt to cleanse a market of African Americans. And they love it today.
Right. So I'm not understanding where they're getting this stuff from. I don't understand this. It was a progressive movement that was extremely racist. Kevin, where did I start out at here? Well, we started on Margaret Sanger. Abortion. The left seems to be very adept at rewriting history. They did so kind of in certain ways. They really want to rewrite Civil War history. They want to get rid of everything about the Civil War. I still don't understand that. Things with Margaret Sanger. I mean, how she even came up to remove Alexander Hamilton from the $10 bill, who was actually Alexander Hamilton started the abolitionist movement during the Constitutional Convention in New York and set up places for fugitive slaves to actually find refuge, and replace him with Margaret Sanger. How does the left get away with this? I never hear any like backlash from conservatives, eloquently spoken. Well, not conservatives, but eloquently spoken Republicans. I never hear them come out and say anything.
Well,
go ahead.
History made a shift. Republicans versus Democrats. There was, back in the 1800s, Republicans were Democrats, and a lot of people don't realize this, but a lot of people say that Lincoln was the party of Republicans and so forth. Lincoln was actually a Democrat, and if you look at the voting records, and if you actually look at the way that the various parties voted back in the 1800s, the Republicans were Democrats, and there's been a great study on this about voting records and who exactly voted which way. And around the time of the initial progressive movement in the early 1900s, the party switched. The party switched voting behavior, and what used to be Democrats became Republicans, and what used to be Republicans became Democrats. So if you're talking about the history of how they get away with this sort of thing, it's because they really were different parties back then, and it's not the same anymore. Like a party that the party that used to vote for bigger government was the Republicans.
Well, Kevin,
hold on, let me challenge Kevin on that.
Yeah, I was going to do the same.
Yeah, in 1866, the Civil Rights Act was all supported by Republicans at the time. That's who was pushing it. The Civil Rights Act in 1964 was supported by Republicans. It was signed into law by a Democrat president. Democrats tend to receive credit for it. The progressive movement, the socialist movement, just moved the Democrat Party further to the left. Part of it was based on racism. You cannot say that these Sanger, these progressive icons. There was another guy, I want to say his name is Madison Grant. I can't remember his name, who was another a guy in the movement, in this intellectual movement. And there was, I think, Bertrand Russell at the time. We're all in on this progressive movement, and a lot of it had to do with racism. Republicans were consistent in it the entire time. They were the party of abolition under Lincoln. I'm not sure where it got to be that Republicans were all of a sudden big government. I don't know. I mean, every president was kind of really docile in the 19th century anyway, until Lincoln, who took war powers and expanded the presidency. But I don't know about big government at that time. I don't know any president that really supported big government in the 19th century, just based alone on precedent.
And in regards to the 1964 Civil Rights Act, I think it was supported by something like 90% of Republicans, or 80% of Republicans, but only something like 60% of Democrats. And that's allegedly after the parties switched. So I don't know how that fits in with a narrative if it does.
Right. I can to be totally honest, I can look into it more.
It's not a narrative, actually. It's based on. There's a statistic based on voting records, and I wish I could remember the authors. That
is it congressional voting records?
Yes, congressional voting records. It goes back to the dawning of the republic, and the
I'd like to know. I would really be interested in to know what they define as a big government in that voting record, because is it something that pertains to the federal government, like expanding the federal government over the states, or is it just merely an expansion of the federal government within the federal government? I mean, it's kind of more nuanced. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
As it relates to constitutional law and so on.
Well, what they define is It's based on what how people voted, frankly, and the Republicans back before the progressive movement in the 1900s with Teddy Roosevelt. Those Republicans voted like Democrats do today.
Right, Teddy Roosevelt was a progressive. I mean,
correct.
Yeah,
correct.
So, but
he
it's not,
was part of the movement that shifted. He was part of the movement that shifted Republicans to Democrats.
Look, the progressive movement was in both parties, but I can use the same argument today. I mean, the Republican Party today is largely a progressive party. It's really shifted. And I mean, I hear this on the news. Jeb Bush today, Brett Baer, while he's going with whatever Jeb Bush is saying, and Jeb Bush has said, oh, this party has moved so far conservative. Ronald Reagan would have a hard time winning the nomination, which is entirely untrue. And Ronald Reagan had a hard time winning the nomination in 1976 because of his family. And in 1980, who went after him, these moderates, George Will went after him. Any moderate at the Crystals went after him.
You're getting caught up in modern definitions, frankly.
Right, but I don't know if it's modern definitions. There was a progressive wing. Teddy Roosevelt did extend greatly the powers of the presidency. I think it was Taft after him that tried to rein it back in, but didn't really stand a chance at that point. But that's all built on precedent. So yes, a lot of Republicans have tried to grow government, with the exception in the 20th century of Coolidge and Reagan. Right,
but you're not talking about the 19th century.
No, the 19th century. To my point. The 19th century presidents were relatively innocuous. I think.
But towards the end of the 19th century, there began a movement to where government would become bigger. Yeah. And that movement was born with Republicans, not Democrats.
With Teddy Roosevelt growing the presidency.
No, before that.
No,
with Lincoln. Before that.
Lincoln expanded the presidency only insofar as the Civil War it pertained to the Civil War and preserving the Union.
No, there were many other policies that were Republican in nature that were expansive in terms of government, and Democrats back then tried to rein in the government. And there's been a study that looks at this. And around the time of Franklin Roosevelt, there was a shift in the parties, to which Republicans essentially began to voting more as a Democrat Party did, and vice versa.
Okay. My research shows the opposite. That
I tell you what, I will find the research on it. Come back to me.
I mean, it's far more nuanced than that.
Correct.
Lincoln was extremely constitutional. Lincoln didn't even want to violate states' rights insofar as it relates to slavery. The guy understood, I don't have any power. I don't have any constitutional power to take slavery away from the states. So everyone froze. I think just Grant froze. But I mean, it wasn't until the rebellion that he seized on in the Constitution, where it says states that are rebelling or an insurrection, that gives him. He used the War Powers Act at that time. I can go into that all day, but that was about the only time he really had to, in some senses, claim more power, because war powers is relatively nebulous. So he had to assume what powers to take in order to maintain the Union, and it did expand the presidency, but not to the extent that Teddy Roosevelt did. Teddy Roosevelt greatly expanded the presidency, and it was merely more under the guise of the progressive movement, and the Republicans at that time weren't very happy, so that's why he left the Republican Party and started his Bull Moose Party. What was it, 1912 or something? He started that party. I don't remember, but this is a good debate, Kevin. And I will destroy you on it another time. Maddie, do you have any more information to back me up here, so we can attack Kevin on this one?
I found a National Review article by Kevin Williamson that I posted in the chat that I read a while ago, and I remember that it says the opposite of what Kevin said, but I need to reread it at least once to be able to reiterate the points. So.
But Kevin does bring. Yeah, Kevin did bring up good points about,
of course.
I mean, big government in the Republican Party. It certainly wasn't unique to Democrats.
I don't think it's really that big a claim that parties change over time or that ideologies change. Of course not.
Right, but I mean, I see a lot of consistency. Of course, I see some change, but I mean, you can't deny that a Republican, Teddy Roosevelt, is responsible for expanding in the domestic scope, like insofar as taking over land.
Right.
And other powers that the president, presidential powers. Go ahead.
The claim that I'm used to hearing and I guess rebutting is the claim that in the '60s over civil rights the two parties switched. So I mean.
Yeah, I hear that all the time.
Yeah,
it's nonsense.
changed in the 20s is new to me, so I don't actually know as much about
Right.
that.
So you mean to tell me, so when Nixon in 1960 wait, okay, I'm confused. Nixon in the 60 debates against JFK was a Democrat.
And apparently Goldwater was too.
Yeah, and Goldwater was, and then they changed after to fit into the left's narrative that they're not racist.
As soon as the Civil Rights Amendment was signed, all the Democrats were okay.
That day.
But
that day, everyone switched.
Let's ban the Confederate flag. How about we
Yeah.
actually look at history? Let's ban the Democrat Party. How about that? Okay. Look, you had William Fulbright, who was the fellow who was Bill Clinton's mentor, huge racist. Al Gore's father, giant racist.
His father must have been a Republican. Will.
Yeah. No, that's right. Yeah,
course.
because it switched because it fits, and it makes me feel better. You know. Speaking of feeling, in California, there's a lady who is trying to ban the words in any government documents, husband and wife.
I saw that.
So this is where we're at right now.
Yeah,
We're crushing babies from their legs and their head, and then we're banning words like husband and wife because there's no difference apparently between genders now. I don't understand this. One guy, Bruce Jenner, said now he's a woman. Now get rid of all words defining differences between men and women. I don't know what man or woman would really like that very much. Like the reason I like women because they're not men. Am I crazy here?
I'm pretty sure gay couples use the term husband and lesbian couples use the term wife. So I don't see what the big deal is.
And I'm sure that gay
men.
What
is the alternative?
I'm sure
what percentage of? Sorry, you go on.
I'm sure that gay men don't want men to become women. I think the whole point of them being gay is that they're attracted to men. So this is losing me here. Grant, am I going wrong? Do we just keep moving further left? This totalitarianism?
It's just this idea of having to be fully accepting of every culture in every way possible has led us to the point where everything is just neutral.
So it's like a relativism, really.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want anything to be relative to anything else anymore.
It's cultural relativism.
It's honestly, it's like almost cultural redistribution.
Right, and it's funny because and I'll get to Kevin in a second, but you're taking words away that people that don't really even follow what's going on in the government use. So you take it out of government documents, they don't care. They're still going to use the term husband and wife. Yeah. So we literally have a government and some state governments that just go against the people. And I mean, that's tyranny at that point. Montesquieu wrote about it 240 years ago. So I mean, when do we wake up here and lessen the size and scope of government? Go ahead, Kevin. Do you think the people will wake up, or do you think they're just so apathetic that they just don't? It's like they don't even know.
It's apathy. The people would rather watch sports and so forth than actually define marriage. Frankly, I mean, there's a movement afront to redefine what marriage is, and it's not something that people come home from work and actually sit down and confront themselves.
Right.
No, it's something that is played out in the media, and it's not played out in the dining rooms of America.
Right.
So I think it happens. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but there's special interests that confront these issues, and they bring them to Washington in terms of legislation, sometimes in terms of what they believe, and not every American knows this stuff. And then before you know it, the right people have heard about what marriage should be between anybody and anybody. And next thing you know, it's in the mainstream media, and that's it. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's something that happens like in terms of the entire populace becomes in favor of gay marriage. I think it happens slowly, but with a very important minority in terms of the media and in terms of the right people in government, and they take up the cause, and before you know it, it's a law. Or the Supreme Court takes it up, and before you know it, gay marriage is the law of the land.
Right, and I'm going to get back to you in a minute because I want to talk about. Obviously, we talk about this a lot, but controlling the narrative, and that's part of it. The mass media controls the narrative, but I'm going to poke holes in that, and I'll come back to you, Kevin. Matt, are we I want to know how the country's moving so far left. I mean, let's look at the abortion issue here. Let's look at Planned Parenthood, and let me give you an example. I think it was about 10 years ago, everybody was talking about stem cells, right? It was what's the appropriate time for us to use a fetus in order to harvest its stem cells. I think that the consensus may have been 2 weeks.
Okay.
2 weeks after fertilization, okay? And I mean, this was debated for 10, 12 years. I mean, people were really, I don't know, after 2 weeks, it's not right. Now we have somebody killing a baby, like, you had Gosnell killing babies, obviously, after they were born. And now you have Planned Parenthood talking about actually ripping a fetus apart and then trying to sell its body parts. And now we're having a discussion at what point, can you sell the organs of an unborn baby that's been murdered? I don't know how we got here so quickly, and how people don't see that as an absolute aberration, and call to end any sort of funding to this Planned Parenthood. Why are we funding this?
Yeah, just to highlight how stupid people are. To show the audience, Grant posted a link to the Planned Parenthood article, and some chick claimed that Grant was contradicting himself because he thinks you should be able to sell organs on the open market. But apparently it's a contradiction to think that you then can't kill children and sell their organs. So,
and it's not even,
big hypocrite.
And it's in no way congruent. Grant, can you tell us how that has no congruency to? Go ahead.
It has zero to do at all. It doesn't make any sense. What do you abort? You don't. It's like you abort a child and then sell its fetus for profit. I mean, if someone would want to do that, that's pretty sick, I think. But it's no way. It's just not even the same thing. And I think she also compared it to objectifying women. If you were to criminalize it, it would be objectifying women. That's what they try to do. Is that they try to go on these. You try to argue these abstractions that you can't really argue against, and we see it a lot in economics too. I know, because you'll say, I support a $0 minimum wage. Oh, well, you're a racist. Well, how do you argue against racism? Like, what? There's nothing you can say that it's just there, just a belief.
That, well, you could point out that more black people.
You can't argue. A feeling is just a feeling.
Right. Matt, can you give us an example of how selling, say, body organs, and using he handled the issue of how abortion has nothing to do with.
Yeah, so in the case of selling body organs, you're probably above the age of 18 and able to willingly consent to it.
Really? So you could consent? Oh.
So in the case of the abortion thing, it's you're not born and are not sentient,
and most people would do it.
Sell it. So.
Most people would probably do it when they die already.
Right. Yeah.
When they die like, naturally.
And Matt, can you tell me how that would benefit people?
Selling organs? Well, there's a huge shortage in the kidney market right now, and
there's a shortage. Why?
There's like a 5-year waiting list right now.
Well,
Matt, you look like you. Matt, you look like you could use a kidney right now.
Okay, very funny. Now, there's actually even a simpler thing you could do to alleviate the shortage than have an open market. In countries where you're an organ donor by default, their organ donation rates are something like 90+%. In countries where you're not an organ donor and then have to opt in, it's usually around 20 or 30%. And I mean, you're technically not taking anyone's free choice by making them an organ donor by default because they can always opt out. So it's just one small change you can make, and just like that, almost everyone would be an organ donor. So I think that's the best idea.
I was always conflicted on this, but the way you end the shortage, which is always a price phenomena, is to just allow the market to allocate those resources. And obviously, you would need regulations. You can't have parents selling their kid's kidney.
Right.
I mean, you can't have, there would be certain things that you cannot do.
You can't have doctors killing them and trying organs.
I argued that you should only be allowed to leave your body as an estate, as part of your estate, and just treat it that way. And when you die, you can either give up all of your body, part of your body, whatever it might be. And the real benefit is obviously we would end up saving a lot in healthcare.
So
and we would also, but we'd also give low-income people opportunity to have some sort of, will or inheritance down to their children who are usually equally poor, if not carrying their debt.
I think
we're getting to the point where we're getting to the point of Rothbard.
Yeah.
Y'all know
no.
Yeah.
We're getting to not Rothbard. We're getting to the point of how the market allocates resources, and you could argue that for anything. What Rothbard did is just took all the ethical and moral constraints and threw them out the window and said anarchy, and never really provided a proper philosophical foundation for any of his assertions or claims. But Rothbard, toss him aside. The way to end the shortage is just to allow the market to allocate those resources and have government, play the umpire as it does in anything else. And I condone. Look, I think the problem with your point, Grant, is when somebody dies, I think their organs are worthless up until a certain amount of time after. So you would have to know when they. I don't know if they were going to die or at what age. It's really hard to harvest that organ.
I know, but I think that could easily be something that is worked out in a free market. Like if someone really wants to hand down $120,000 in organs or $500,000 in organs, whatever, they're probably willing to incur some risk. If they don't have any money, they're probably willing to incur some risk. Yeah, I'll die 2 days earlier or something like that. Whatever. I mean, I don't know. Certainly don't pretend to know the science behind it, but I know it's possible.
I want to look into that. We should actually look into that. Yeah. That would be something that would be really cool to look into.
There's a lot of what I found was a lot of sort of medical papers arguing either way, and to be honest, it just was it was too much, and I just kind of skimmed them. It was just they were going crazy.
Yeah, it gets pretty difficult. Yeah, but I mean, we really have lurched left to things that we would consider atrocities before we're even considering now, and you have people out there defending this. I mean, defending Planned Parenthood. I don't think 10 years ago you'd be hard-pressed to find someone to defend that.
I mean, I think the only way you could defend Planned Parenthood is defend everything, is defend, I don't know, let's say providing birth control to low-income areas. That's the only way you could defend them.
Right.
Everything else, no, of course not.
Right.
But it became a women versus men's issue. And
that's right.
It became politicized. Like so many other stupid issues, it became politicized, and so there's half of America believes it, believes against it. So
right, I think
that's what I was saying earlier. They just make it about an abstraction.
Right.
They make it about racism.
They
can't argue that empirically or quantitatively or anything.
Right. They make the truth subjective to gender or skin pigmentation. Oh, you can't talk about this because you're white, or you can't talk about this because you're a male, and that's not racist. When you do that, that's okay. You see, you can't talk about this because you're white.
Yeah.
That's not racist. Or
it's a brilliant political strategy. I'll be honest with you. It's a brilliant political strategy.
It's akin to in the 14th and 15th century, 12th century, when people would say heretic when arguing with the church. You know what I mean? It's one of those words that stops debate in its tracks. You can no longer debate.
I've actually had people complain, or seen people complain that our show has too many white people on it, because apparently in a country where 75% of the population is white, it's surprising that most people on the show are white.
Because when I was when I grew up, and doing all my reading, I considered my skin pigmentation while I was doing it, and what I wanted to advocate, I thought, gee, as a white guy, I really shouldn't do this because people would be offended. Like, what is
just as a white guy, I want to say to everyone out there, sorry for Western civilization, modern science, the internet are bad. My opinions don't matter.
I don't understand. Like, first of all, how about it? They relegate people to groups to balkanize. I may have the same skin pigmentation or similar to you guys. It's not like we meet every week and go, hey, let's see how we oppress these minorities today. You know what I mean? Hold on. Go one at a time. Kevin, go. Let's go.
It's any difference. It's not necessarily just skin color, like you said before. It's sex. It's any difference whatsoever they will take advantage of.
Right.
So I think a lot of racism and sexism today is spread and promulgated by the narrative that's spread by the media.
Yeah, and that is narratives, and that's what I wanted to get into. Grant, did you have a point to make? I'm sorry.
No, I can't remember what it was.
All right, I think
if I remember what it was.
I mean, you made the point that it's brilliant strategy by the left, and it really is, and it's really the same thing. It's just cutting off the debate and making it's like the truth doesn't matter, and they always obfuscate the actual debate. It's not, and I see Jeb Bush do this all the time, with Common Core.
It's always about an abstraction. They don't talk about anything directly.
They never want to engage, and that Jeb Bush I really don't like that guy. Kevin, it is about narratives. You're right, but why? Tell me. You study the media more than I do. Can you tell me why the 24-hour cable stations, mainly the leftist mainstream media, which is if you still arguing that the media is not tilted far to the left, you're a loon job, okay? How do they still have such a stranglehold on these narratives when there's so many other avenues of media? including the one we're on now.
Well, if you actually look at why there's a bias, it's not as simple as, you know, the people who are in the actual media, the people who write the stories. You know, it's not that their parents grew up as Democrats and so forth. What you actually have to understand is that most of the major networks, most of their base is in large cities, and most large cities are based out of, are actually Democrat in their actual voting percentage. So what you have to look at is how are they going to make their money, and who are they actually selling to? Who's the media selling to? And they're not selling to the Kansas farmer. They're not selling to all the people out there who have decentralized access to television and so forth. They're selling to large markets, and the large markets over the course of the 20th century became Democrat, and because of that, the money followed ideology, and what you ended up with is a system where the media ended up trying to sell their narratives to, essentially, you're trying to tell people what they already know. You know, you're trying to confirm biases, and that's what happened.
When you say cities, you mean coastal cities, I'm assuming. I mean, it's
not...
Well,
yes, but even interior cities, if you look at them, most of them in the city are Democrat-leaning, are progressive-leaning, are liberal-leaning. And most of those, you know, when you centralize a media system, when you have an antenna that's hooked up in Cincinnati or that's hooked up in Hartford, or wherever, the most people they can gather is around their antenna, and this is the theory, is that bias began because the most people that they could garner on their broadcast around them happened to be Democrats, because that's where people lived.
Right. Now let me try to poke some holes in that theory and ask you some questions. Those are good points, but when you broadcast a network, it's not just relegated to a city. You can the market's a lot larger than that. You have the interior of the country. There's a ton of people in the interior, and I mean, if you've seen Fox News, I mean, they're clobbering the other news stations and ratings and ad revenue.
That's a national network.
No, yes. So was NBC, CBS, and ABC, and they were all leftist. None of them decided to capitalize on that huge market in the middle of the country and those others outside of the city where they would have made a ton of money. So that's where I'm lost on how...
You're answering your own question.
How so?
Because who capitalized on it, and who's now the market leader? Who has been...
No, Fox News.
Right.
Right, but Fox News is but one. I mean, Fox News is one station that everybody says it's far to the right, which it is not. But you have Hannity on. You have op-ed pieces where where obviously they're further right than other stations. But there's one. If you look at Al Jazeera, CNBC, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, what was it, CNN, every one of these stations is left. None of them seem to want to encroach on Fox News market. They literally have no competition because these other cable stations are so stubbornly leftist.
That's why if you and I somehow managed to come up with the billions of dollars to start another...
we're going to start it right here.
If you start another right-wing news network that's nationwide, I think you're going to compete with Fox News, and you're probably going to make a lot of money.
Hey guys, last time I checked, Unbiased America Live is nationwide. So let's all put our heads together.
And we're pretty right wing. We're pretty right wing.
We're global, Will.
What's that?
We're global. We're not nationwide.
Oh my! We have a global network here. We're sitting on trillions of dollars of ad revenue. Except the thing, you want to know what holds us back? Kevin's face, I think, is what holds us back.
And that's Dan Fourier.
Yeah, it's actually not bad. I like your scruff. You look pretty good.
Thanks.
You just use Just for Men?
Actually, I salt and pepper it myself.
Yeah?
Hey, Kevin, did you look at the Iranian deal at all? Have you looked at that?
I did. I was actually writing a post on it right now, and and it's a tough deal to call because the two narratives are pretty strong, and as much as you right-wing people want to decry it, there wasn't much ability for the government, the presidency, and so forth to actually impose their will upon Iran, because a lot of the shut the fuck up, you're killing me. Stop laughing while I'm fucking talking. A lot of the sanctions were not put in place. The sanctions that hurt Iran were not put in place by America alone. They were put in place by people like the European Union and
Russia and China initially too. Okay, then we're going to get back to that point in a second when I
but how do you keep those in place?
The problem was lifting them in the first place. It was so difficult to get China and Russia to agree to sanctions. Those were crippling sanctions, and they started to lift those sanctions. And we really were negotiating with no leverage here. It was like strengthen sanctions, strangle them. That's what we did to the Soviet Union. The whole purpose of the arms race was to cripple the Soviet Union economically. Why would we give a terrorist rogue regime? There are no property. First of all, there are no property rights in Iran. So let's get out of everybody's head that this helps the people. This does not help the people. This helps their regime that has a stranglehold on the people. And it bolsters their coffers. Moreover, they threw in concessions in there, like now they lifted the embargo on conventional weapons.
But Will, before you move on to somebody else, I'm going to throw it back.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
But when did these start strangling Tehran? I mean, when was the moment that they started?
2009.
And what happened then?
Nothing, because our president did nothing. He said nothing and did nothing. Okay.
Because the international community came together and applied the same sanctions that we wanted.
They'll never do it again.
Exactly. So how are we going to keep the pressure up?
We saw that we can unilaterally crush them with sanctions. You have to do everything. Okay. So what you're saying is, let's not do sanctions. Let's just give them a means to get the bomb. Is what you're saying. And then inspections. If they reject IAEA inspectors, they have to go to a board on which Iran sits, and then there's a bureaucracy. There's a 24-day period before they can even get in and check. They say inspections anytime, anywhere. It's nonsense. It's a lie. They're lying.
I agree.
And this is to even say that this is to say that Iran complies. Of course, they don't want to comply. They want the money, they want the weapons, and they want to take over the Middle East. And this gives them fast track to do so. And let me remind you, the person that negotiated this deal was the same person that negotiated the deal in North Korea, in which Clinton came out and said the same things. Oh, they're not going to get a bomb, blah, 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 blah. And they got a bomb. I mean, come on. It's like, what is going on here? What's wrong with people? How did the reset with Russia work? What's with this extending? I mean, no deal is better than this deal. No deal is better than this deal. Hands that you can't. How can you deny it?
There's no deal. No deal is better than this, because when we first started applying sanctions, it was just unilateral. And
okay.
Yes, it was.
No.
We got China and Russia to agree to the sanctions,
which was a big
deal.
deal.
They're not going to agree to it anymore.
That's fine. So if they don't agree to it, what you're saying is, well, let's just give them fast track to the bomb.
No. What I'm saying is, without the entire international community, there's no way to enforce. Okay, so we enforce unilateral sanctions. The United States is not going to do business with Tehran. Okay, well, geez, who else could do business with Iran? Let's see.
Russia already does.
China, Russia.
But let me. I think when we lift our sanctions on Iran, I think they get access to $110 billion. We buy their oil. That's billions. That's billions more. So don't tell me we can't cripple them, or at least lessen the threat with our own sanctions. That's insane.
And don't think that I'm actually in favor of this deal.
I am not, but stop being a liberal for 5 minutes.
I'm being a devil's advocate, and because I hate you like I would kill you and any newborn you had. That's why I'm arguing against you. So, but the truth is, it's not a good deal. But I do believe there is something to the administration's narrative that this is the best they could do.
I think that we should bolster all our enemies' coffers. I don't know why we don't just let's keep subsidizing the Palestinians. Let's keep giving money. Let's give money to Russia while we're at it. Hell, money for everyone. Give money to everybody. Let's trade with Cuba. Let's bolster their regime too. And I don't understand why when the USSR, we shouldn't just send them weapons. We didn't lift it. We should have sent them nukes. I don't know what we
You're
were thinking.
just on a fucking roll. I mean, seriously, everything you're saying is true.
God, but it's the same. Following that logic, that's the logic of this deal.
There's a silver lining. I mean, as you mentioned, they will be able to export oil now, so they may blow a few countries up, but at least we got cheap gas now.
Yeah, let's throw
God damn you, Palumbo! I made you.
Yeah, let's toss cost benefit out the window now because of Ron and Kevin. No, but I mean, you know, it's a horrible deal. This president is legacy shopping. There's no doubt in my mind. He didn't negotiate from a place of any sort of leverage, and you could see this regime dance. I mean, what was it? A week ago, it's death to America, and this week they're dancing in the streets, and we gave one of our biggest enemies, you know, access to bolster the activities, the enemy activities they're already launching against the United States of America. They have actively killed our soldiers in the Middle East. This is nuts. This is Neville Chamberlain, and this is Hitler. That's what it is.
That's exactly what it is.
Hello, history. Hello, history lesson. I don't know. This seems much like
I'm ready for World War III, man. I'm ready for World War III.
I think,
Yeah,
you know,
I'm not.
Will, I think in the history books they're going to reference this conversation and just how wrong Kevin was.
I know. I'm going to be the Peter Schiff.
He didn't see the next Hitler.
World War III. Everyone's going to come to me.
You foresaw the next Hitler, and Kevin just laughed. And I just thought we'd get cheap gas.
That's pretty good. No, but it's a good debate. I want to move on. We have a segment coming up. It's our Libertarian Winners and Losers of the Week. We'll get to that in a minute. I wanted to go into a discussion Grant and I had before the show started. And I just saw a special report, and I saw Jeb Bush on there with Brett Barrett. I mean, you want to talk about a conniving, lying, snake oil salesman, Jeb Bush. This guy is a pro. He's invoking Reagan today. Your family, your dad tried to destroy Reagan, him and his cohorts. So I don't know what you're talking about. I admired Reagan. You didn't admire Reagan. Nothing to you. Despised Reagan. He despises that wing of the party. He hates Rand Paul. He hates Ted Cruz. He despises the conservative wing of the party, and he mocks them. And here's a guy advancing Common Core. You said you made a point. You said Bernie Williams. I don't like him either. He's a Yankee. Yankees are terrible. Anyway, Bernie Sanders. You said is more of a danger to the country. I would agree with you on policy. I don't know to the extent I would agree with you. I think Jeb Bush is just as large of a danger.
I don't know. I think his economic policy would be a lot worse because he's essentially saying that we should import Scandinavian socialism or whatever you want to call that. Whatever you want to call that.
Go ahead, Matt. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
I think the thing you have to take into account though is like the more radical liberals though, their ideas don't have as much chance of passing than like a Ryan Wish Republican. So it's much more likely, Ryan will see their spending increases actually go through than a socialist. So there's that to consider as well.
Right. Hillary and Jeb would pass probably similar legislation.
Yeah.
I would think. You're right. Bernie Williams is a huge look.
Bernie Sanders.
Well, I can't stand the guy. I'd rather say Bernie Williams.
No, he wouldn't become president and have a socialist grip on the country or anything like that.
No, but I mean he could sway Congress.
There'd be a Congress standing in his path. Which, assuming it wasn't all Democrats,
I don't know. This precedent.
I don't know either.
I think he was going to compare himself to Reagan. We should call his economic policies voodoo economics.
Right. I admire the Reagan presidency. He had on his 1980 platform the abolition of the Department of Education. And here, this loon job wants to come in and have the Department of Education nationalize it. What are you talking? That's the complete opposite. So I don't understand. And you know who stopped Reagan from doing that and from doing that goal were the establishment Republicans, mainly people like his dad. So yeah, I think you have a point there, Grant, that Bernie Sanders is worse for the country. To what degree, I don't know. I think it's a little thin layer. But Jeb Bush is pretty bad, man. What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, no. Bernie Sanders is by far the worst thing that we've ever faced as a people. And, I mean, it's not even close, Will. It's not a thin layer or whatever.
I think so.
Said. No, it's not. It's not. I mean, you're taking up the argument of anarchists. You're taking up the argument of people who believe that it's all or nothing, and it's not. I mean, there are large differences on the margin. And Sanders wants to go back to 90% income tax rates. Sanders wants to do the things, and I'm not talking about a small slice of America. He wants to do that to people who have, who are making six figures. I mean,
Right.
he's insane.
But, okay, let's look at it, and we can talk hypothetically what they want to do. Hypothetically, yes, that Bernie Sanders is worse. But let's talk within the constraints of reality here. You're not going to get a 90% top marginal tax rate. That's not going to happen. But Bush will come in, and he will have the means and those sleazy tactics that Boehner has in order to pass laws that nobody wants. You see what I mean? This is what he excels at. His brother got Medicare Part D, No Child Left Behind. How did you get that with a Republican Congress? I mean, this is what I'm worried about. Bernie Sanders isn't going to get anything passed, certainly with a Republican Congress. We already had one Bush nearly destroy the country. Get rid of the Iraq War. Get rid of that. Domestically speaking, on an economic front.
How did Reagan bring down tax rates with a Democratic Congress?
Because he had a ton of political capital when he came into office.
Exactly. Now,
Right.
what happens if somebody comes into office like a Sanders? I'm not saying it's going to be him, but with a ton of political capital.
I don't think there's just no way that he would be able to do that.
Okay, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's a route to this happening.
Right. No, that's a good point, though, actually. That is a good point. I just don't see the American people. I don't think Reagan had the people on his side at that time. He won 48 states, or 49 states. There's no way Sanders will win that many.
No, you're right.
So he had the people on his side. You had 18% inflation. You had 12% interest rates. The inflation was horrible. Reagan understood that I have to either cut taxes here because while Volcker was simultaneously restricting the money supply, which caused the hangover for the first 2.5 years of his presidency until 1983 when the economy just blew up. It's a different time, but that's not a bad point to say that he will have political capital when he comes in. But it would be what would you have to concede? Reagan conceded an awful lot, and he also got rid of the price controls on gasoline, which was a big deal at that time. He did do a lot when he got into office.
Shit hits the fan, and all those and interest rates and inflation and so forth go up. Suddenly, you have somebody an anti-Reagan in office, and I can foresee these things happening.
Yeah, no, good points. Good. I didn't consider that.
That would be the beginning of the end. That would be the beginning of the end.
Okay, let's moving along, Maddie. Let's go to our libertarian winners and losers of the week. You can add a conservative in there, or you could be anybody on the big political stage or anybody within social media. Shoot.
Oh man, I didn't know we were gonna have this segment. It's tough to say. I think my winners: Will Riccandella, Kevin Ryan, and Grant Phillips.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And what's your reasoning?
It's all I could come up with on the spot.
Okay. Who's your libertarian loser?
Oh, it's tough. Who do you not like, Will? That guy.
Who do I not like?
Yeah.
Why don't I give you a second to come up with two? You can come up with two.
I'm trying to think who pissed me off this week.
I'm gonna think. You know, Maddie. You think, and I'll come back to you, and I'm gonna go to Grant. Grant, who are your libertarian winners and losers of the week?
All right, I'm not doing libertarians. I'm just doing winners and losers.
Okay, do winners and losers. Okay.
All right, loser, Hillary Clinton. She went on a rant about the sharing economy and wanted to restrict it and screw over Uber contractors and turn, basically.
They should be arrested.
Yeah, they should all be arrested and taxed heavily. Well, I would rather just deregulate the taxi industry. But anyways,
I'd like to deregulate every industry. How about that?
Yeah, me too. Yeah. My winner is probably going to have to be Donald Trump because he's still he's holding his head up high. He's
leading in the Republican polls.
I don't agree with him, but he's holding his head high and he's standing his ground, and that gets impressive. And he finances his own campaign. So what can you say?
He's leading in the polls because he's not afraid to say what he's going to say, and we need a bold conservative candidate that speaks far more eloquently than Donald Trump, and I think they would run far and away the field, and I don't know where the hell Rand Paul is right now, but that guy should be coming out saying big, bold things right now. He really should, and Donald Trump showed there's a market for it if you can keep it within the realm of, attracting all voters. Kevin, your winners and losers of the week.
Well, I'm going to echo. The winner is Don Trump, but it's not because he's right. It's not because he's doing a good job. is because the media is championing him. The media literally wants him to win, and the media, of course, is liberal, and they want Donald Trump to win because they know that the biggest up-and-coming electorate, which is Hispanics, is flat out against him. I saw a poll tonight, something like 90 to 10%. They're going to vote against him. They know he has a built-in anti-Hispanic voting bloc against him. There's no way. I mean, you look at somebody like George Bush. He won because he got some Hispanics to vote for him. Trump's not going to. Okay, and the loser is the Republican Party because they're allowing the media to essentially.
You're right.
They're allowing the media to tell the who is the Republican nominee.
You're
already.
right.
And we're a year away from this happening, and they're telling the American people that the Republican nominee is this anti-immigrant, anti-Hispanic person, even though the reason that he's actually at the top of the polls right now has nothing to do with favorability. He's the lowest. He's got the most unfavorability of any candidate.
Right.
The reason he's at the
honest
top,
negatives.
The reason that he's at the top of the polls right now is because people have heard of him, and that's what happens until the actual campaign starts happening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the Z. I forget what it's called, the Z quotient, where the more people that hear of you, the more people that will vote for you, and that's what's happened. People.
Your latter point is a no-brainer. Yeah, they've heard of him. You're right. That's why he's in the polls. But there is a reason. He is bold. He is out there saying things that some people want to be said, regardless of what caricature the media makes of him. I'm not saying I'd use the same words, but there's far more nuance than what people are allowing it to be. You're right. And
but the media is shaping this.
That's where you nailed it. And they're controlling the message in as much as controlling other candidates and the Republican Party in general. And I think Ted Cruz was the only one to say, I'm not going to engage in this. I'm not here to bash Trump. That's not what I'm here to do. And I thought he was the only one not to take the bait that Chris Christie, God, he's really hard to talk about without being vulgar. I can't stand that guy either. He hops on. He just runs, constantly running his mouth. I can't stand. I don't even want to talk about him. He's getting me angry. Matt.
Yes.
That was a really good point, though, on the media, Kevin. I forgot. I wanted to bring that up today. How they control the Republican Party, and it's really the party of sorry. Is what the Republican Party is. It's a sorry party of sorry. Matt. Yes. Libertarian winners and losers. Any winner and loser. Pick one.
All right. My winners will. That's not changing. So in search of my loser, I went over to Chris Cantwell's page, hoping to find something retarded, and he actually wrote a denunciation of the Planned Parenthood video. So I have nothing this week, my friend.
Wow.
Next week, we're gonna have 2 libertarian losers. So don't worry.
That would almost move him into my winner slot there for Cantwell.
You know, and all the libertarian losers this week, all the ones who didn't download my book for free.
Yeah, very good.
There we go. Plug
I like how you. And what's your book called?
I think it's called A Conscience of a Young. It's best book ever.
And is that the only one you ever wrote?
There's a second one called In Defense of Classical Liberalism.
And did you write that whole book? In Defense of Classical Liberalism. Did you write the whole book?
Kevin, I wrote.
And did you write every chapter?
Yeah, I wrote 50% of the book, and Corey Iacono wrote 49.9%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but there was
part.
no chapters written by, say, a guest.
I think within a chapter there might have been like a few pages by some guy who lives in a palace and is a huge 1%er, but I can't remember his name.
Okay. Bastille Day.
He's just drunk on camera all the time. He's kind of weird, but.
And Frank Lloyd Wright was clearly the architect of his home. Very good, Matthew. I like your winners and losers.
Thank you.
My winner would have to be Mark Skousen,
who
I think he's still at FEE, who put on Freedom Fest in Las Vegas, which was excellent. They had so many workshops, so many great speakers. Donald Trump was there. He really spared. It was really open to differing views within the liberty movement. You can't beat that. It really reminds me kind of Liberty Me, that allows, obviously, me, who's a huge statist, to come on here, and you guys who are anarchists to come on here, and then we debate it out. But he really did an excellent job. Really well put on. Liberty Fund was there. I bought a bunch of really cheap books. And all the booths were. It was an excellent thing. So Mark Skousen clearly the big winner on that front. The big loser. That's a really hard one to. That's a hard one to decide. I'm going to have to go with Jeb Bush because I despise Jeb Bush, and every word that comes out of his mouth is essentially a lie. And basically, his defense of Common Core was, "We're not smart enough to understand what it is." So
he must have been educated by Common Core.
Yes, exactly. The standards were way higher than in Florida, so that means the standards for Common Core are way higher than any of the 49 other states he has no clue about. So that should really. Then he talks about the Constitution. I mean, this is fascinating to me that this guy thinks that the nationalize, let's unconstitutionally nationalize education, and then let's talk about the Constitution, the document that restricts the federal government from imposing its will on the states. I find that reprehensible. Anyway, it was a really good show. We have some people coming up. July 29th, we have Steve Horwitz to discuss his book, Hayek's Modern Family, Classical Liberalism and an Evolution of Social Institutions, which I think it comes out in September. So we'll have him on the 29th. Wayne Allen Root will be on the show sometime either the end of this month, perhaps next week, or early August. And Andrea Mays will be back in August as well, who we had on to discuss her book on Shakespeare and uncovering the first folio. Is there anything else I'm missing?
Yes, I want to tell you all, because you didn't go back to me, which is that this whole what I was talking about was where the ideology shifted between the parties. I'm going to post that on Unbiased America because you're just an idiot.
Okay.
You're a complete moron. And I'm going to post everything, all my references, everything, the graph that I came up with, the write-up and so forth. I'll post that on Unbiased America, and you can, everybody watching the show can go on and read it and realize that the three of you are complete idiots.
Kevin, Will and I are going to write responses in our blog called Unbiased America, and we're going to make Unbiased America look like the biggest idiot ever.
So Unbiased America says you're wrong.
And again, please follow Unbiased America. We are capitalists, the modern libertarian, being classically liberal. Did I say that? I probably did.
Probably.
And the analytical conservative. All really great pages, make you think. And you can find our show on Liberty Me. There's YouTube channel where it's always archived, or you can click again on this link, and I think it might direct you there. If not, just search YouTube. Also, Politics After Dark with Rachel Mills comes on right after. And I think that's about it, unless you guys want to say anything else, and let's hope there's no swear words in it and it's somewhat intelligent. Anybody have anything to say?
What are we, public broadcasting?
Yeah, I know. Let's try to keep it clean here.
I said like 2 swears, and I'm getting these messages over my headset. Don't swear! Don't swear!
Yeah, I know. I mean, God forbid we want to get it like actual academics in here that don't use the F word.
Well, used to be beer and bastards. What do you want?
Yeah, well, we changed it for a reason. Anyway, and then, hopefully we can get Bongino on, right, Maddie?
Yeah, I'm actually going to be on his podcast once he's moving to Florida, so once he's settled in, he's going to be on his podcast, and I'll talk to him then about coming on the show.
All right, perfect.
And I'd like to get David Friedman on.
Okay, and David Friedman. I mean, that would be great. So thank you for watching, and you know where to find us. Follow our pages. Grant Phillips seems like he's starting to work out again. You have really great shoulders there, Grant. Keep it up.
Oh, thank you. Wow,
Kevin, who's never seen a weight in his life. Thank you so much, Kevin. Keep eating donuts.
I have people lift weights for me. Thank you.
Yeah, you would. And Matt Palumbo, child prodigy, author of 2 books at age 9, but really looks 13. Thanks, guys. See you later.
See you.
Scandinavian countries are socialist. No, they're not. In fact, the Scandinavian countries are more free than America is in a lot of ways. And so you have to be really careful when you get into defining what socialism is.
Let me stop you there, Kevin. Is it Sweden that has? Is it Sweden or the Swiss that don't have a minimum wage? I get them confused all the time.
I think Switzerland.
It's the Swiss, right?
Yeah, but they do have, and this is what a lot of people will tell you, is they do have a lot of their sectors go by minimum wages per industry.
Okay.
Per unions have, a lot of their unions have agreed to industry minimum wages, but that's different. And anytime somebody points that out to you, you have to say that's not really a minimum wage. That's a lot of a lot of different industries coming up with a different minimum wage per industry, and essentially that's a market wage.
Right, and they're involved. They're involved in this contract. They understand the costs associated, and they could set an appropriate price rather than some disinterested third party that has no ideas of the costs involved or what the labor in the labor market's worth.
Exactly,
right?
and when you have a minimum wage in America is based on there really is no restriction on what it's all about. I mean, it's any industry, any skill level, any country. I mean, any city, any state, and so forth. It's a true minimum wage, which has no real economic bearing on what it's on the people that are making it. In the Scandinavian countries, it's actually negotiated by the various industries, and it's actually different by different states, different places, and so forth. So it's a true market minimum wage. So just you can't get into they're socialist.
That you doing that speech anywhere else. Like, I don't hear him advocating for full-on free markets and using the term capitalism anywhere else. And I understand that, you know, he's at Freedom Fest. He understands there's a ton of libertarians there, and he's not going to catch any flack. But to me, it shows how sometimes the establishment Republicans can be somewhat gutless in their defense of markets and in their defense of liberty, and they only do it when it's easy. And I think, I mean, you would think that it just turned me off to him. You would think that it would be like, oh man, this is really great. Turn me off to him, meaning why aren't you doing this other places? Grant, do you think I have a point?
Yeah, I think you do, and I don't really think it's something that's just to the conservatives side of the field. I think it's also to the left. I mean, you have basically most Democrat policies, you might as well call them socialism, and that's what they are.
Right.
But not many of them, actually really only Bernie Sanders, even though he's an independent, I guess, will use the word socialism.
Right.
You know,
right.
And they won't use it in public. Now, if they go to like some leftist convention, I'm sure that they don't mind tossing that out there, because it's probably seen as like an extremist word either way.
Mm. You know,
using those socialism versus free market capitalism, they're
to that
each way their own extreme in some ways.
Right, to that extent, and it should be explained that the definition of socialism has changed. If you really want to look at it, the definition of socialism as it's used today really means fascism. That's essentially what it is. It's not so much what it used to be, government control the means of production. Now today it's government controlling the means of production through regulations and taxation. And that's exactly what the Nazis in fascist Germany did, and Mussolini did in Italy. So I mean, it's really, I mean, I think it was Peter Drucker who said, you know, fascism is the stage reached when socialism or communism becomes the illusion that it is. You know what I mean? It's like, let's keep the private property and the incentive structure in the hands of private property owners, but let's control that property through laws and regulations and progressive taxation. You know what I mean? So it's like when he's really saying socialism, he really means fascism to a certain degree. Kevin, you did a post on this one time. Would you agree with my assessment on that?
Say it again.
Did you hear anything I said?
Yeah, I did, but I just joined like a minute ago.
Okay, you were there when I started.
No, I wasn't.
Okay. I was talking about the definitions of socialism and how today, the way it's used today is more in tune with the definition of fascism, whereas socialism was once defined as the government controls the means of production. Today is government really controls the means of production not by ownership, but by heavy regulations, laws, and tax structure. Certainly the progressive tax structure, licensure, barriers to entry, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of people who call themselves socialists don't really understand is that socialism, true socialism, hasn't really existed in a long time. And you know how a lot of people call themselves capitalists say, oh, well, you know, there's no such thing as a capitalist country and no such thing as a communist country. Socialism, true socialism, hasn't really existed since the 1920s in the Soviet Union. And what we have in America right now is not socialism, it's a mixed market. What they have in Cuba even is the closest thing you have to socialism, but it's still a mixed market.
Right.
And a lot of people are confused when you talk about socialism and they think, okay, well, the Scandinavian...
All right. Hello, everybody. I think this is like our third or fourth official episode of Unbiased America Live. If you count the broadcast from Freedom Fest, I think it's the fourth. We're here with our regular panel, our most consistent panel, well, consistent when Matt Palumbo's computer works. But I'm here with Matt Palumbo, being classically liberal, Unbiased America, just about everything else. And your book is now available for free for Liberty.me members, right, Matty?
Yep. I know. My first conscious to be a conservative. I believe you have to be a member of Liberty.me, but I think in defense of classical liberalism, anyone can download it from Liberty.me. I believe. So
right.
That was available as well.
And Grant, the modern libertarian, and We Are Capitalists. There was one thing I wanted to. You came out with a piece. I don't know if it was this week or last week, but it was. We talked about it briefly last week.
Yes.
And then we'll get into that today too. So remind me about. I want to get into that.
All right.
The public employee unions.
I'm sure we will when we talk about how stupid liberals are at some point.
Yeah. And Kevin, who just showed up a little bit late, purveyor of Unbiased America. He started it. Also, it's the show with the same name, Unbiased America. I thought that was a good name. I think that's the only thing Kevin's ever done right. But today's show is mainly on a bunch of random different things. There's so much going on in the news. I kind of wanted to start out with Freedom Fest and what's upcoming in the show. Freedom Fest is really cool. Marco Rubio actually had a good speech. It was really heavily. It was a very speech predicated on capitalism. But the problem with that irked me was, and maybe you guys would get this, is I don't hear him saying
they're not, we're socialist, we're not type of argument, because it's just not true.
Right. Maddie, you did a lot of work on this. I think you compared certain. I know you did health markets.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, and how the price system here in the United States best allocates resources in the healthcare industry as opposed to Britain and Canada. Mm-hmm. Insofar as the definition of socialism is concerned, a lot of people use that word, and Milton Friedman's brought it up a couple of times at the changing definition. And I brought this up implicitly with Peter Schiff. Mm-hmm. I used fascism instead of socialism, and he acknowledged it. He said, we do have a fascist system. Do you think that's a correct assessment to apply the word fascist instead of socialism, or do you think there's political implications associated with the term fascism that you may not have under socialism, which I don't necessarily see?
I don't know. I think some people might invoke Godwin's law because fascism is obviously associated with Nazi Germany or some not so nice regimes. So some people might associate it with that and think it's an unfair comparison. But
Mm-hmm.
literally, fascism. The difference between that and socialism is fascism is you have private industry and you have government essentially have the ability to use it as a scapegoat since they're really
Right.
behind the curtains instead of directly controlling things. So
Mm-hmm.
literally, yes, that's true. Also, to address what you brought up about healthcare and prices, it's really the only place in healthcare where the price system is in cosmetics and LASIK.
Right.
Two areas where health insurance doesn't apply. So there's people actually bear the cost of these transactions. And
Can you recollect? Let me stop you there. Can you recollect off the top of your head how prices have declined in the cosmetic and LASIK markets?
It has been significant. Unfortunately, I can't remember the